Nobody in that stadium understood what they were actually watching. From the outside, it looked simple enough. A young woman walking onto a grass court in Berlin, racket in hand, ready to play another early round match. Collect some points. Do her job. Move on. Normal. Routine. Forgettable. Except it wasn't. Because high above center court, hidden behind the glass walls of a private suite that rarely saw visitors during opening rounds, something had already been decided. A presence had arrived quietly, without announcement, without fanfare. And by the time the afternoon ended, a 21-year-old Filipina athlete named Alex would find herself standing at the center of a story far larger than any tournament could contain. Because somewhere inside that stadium sat a man who had reshaped the modern world. A man whose wealth exceeded the economies of entire nations. A man with the freedom to be absolutely anywhere on earth at any given moment. And on this particular day, he chose Berlin. He chose this court. He chose to watch her. The reason would stun everyone who heard it. Berlin, June 2026. The pressure around Alex Eala had been growing for days. After a painful defeat at Queen's Club, the doubts had crept back out of hiding. Critics who had gone quiet during her best moments were finding their voices again. The conversations were familiar, almost scripted at this point. Maybe the momentum was slowing. Maybe the rise had been too fast. Maybe the dream run was finally approaching its natural end. What none of them remembered was that Alex had heard every single one of those words before. And every single time, her response was identical. She proved them wrong. As she stepped onto center court at the Steffi Graf Stadium, the Berlin skies stretched wide and clear above her, almost perfectly built for grass court tennis. Philippine flags moved gently through the crowd. Supporters leaned forward in their seats, quietly expectant. Standing across the net was one of the most dangerous players in the world at that moment. Donna Vekic had not arrived as an underdog. She had arrived as a champion. Days earlier, she had walked into a tournament as a lucky loser and somehow transformed that thin opportunity into a title. Her confidence was at its peak. Her ranking was climbing. Her belief in herself had never felt stronger. And most experts expected that momentum to continue. But there was one detail that kept sitting quietly in the back of every conversation. Their head-to-head record. Alex had beaten her before. Not once. Twice. Every single time they had faced each other across a net, Alex had found a way through. And in tennis, that kind of history does not stay on paper. It travels into the match with you. It settles in your body. It whispers things in quiet moments. Tennis is not played only with rackets. It is played with memory. The first few games told the story immediately. Donna Vekic was not facing the same player she remembered. She was facing something sharper, something cleaner, something operating at a level that felt almost unfair. Alex's movement was precise. Her shots came from angles that seemed impossible. Her decision-making was so fast it barely looked like decision-making at all. It looked like instinct. Within minutes, something changed in the atmosphere of the stadium. The crowd stopped wondering who might win. They started wondering how dominant this might become. Vekic tried everything. She attacked. She changed pace. She pushed for pressure. She searched for answers. And every single time, Alex had a response ready. Another winner. Another point. Another moment that left people in the stands quietly shaking their heads in disbelief. The first set disappeared in less than 30 minutes. But that was only the beginning. The second set felt like watching something rare. That narrow window when an athlete stops thinking and simply moves. When confidence becomes so complete that it stops feeling like confidence and starts feeling like gravity. Natural. Inevitable. Alex was inside that window. You could see it in everything. The way she walked between points. The way she set up for each shot. The way she never rushed, never panicked, never wasted a single movement. Every game deepened her rhythm. Every point added to something that was building toward a finish that felt somehow already written. And then it was over. 6-2, 6-3. Simple numbers. but the performance behind them was anything but simple. Alex Eala had not survived Donna Vekic. She had taken her apart. Cleanly. Completely. Without hesitation. The crowd stood. Flags waved. The noise rose up from the stands like a wave. And Alex allowed herself one small, quiet smile as she looked around the court she had just owned. What she did not know was that someone else had been watching every single second, and his applause carried a meaning she could not yet imagine. The whispers moved through the stadium like electricity. First came the double takes. Then the phones appeared. Then the heads started turning away from the court and upward, toward the private suite above center court. At first, people refused to believe it. Then more people saw it. Then the disbelief gave way to something else entirely. Because sitting inside that exclusive box, the kind of suite normally reserved for royalty and world leaders, was Bill Gates. That Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, one of the most influential human beings of the past 50 years. A man whose decisions had touched billions of lives across technology, medicine, education, and global development. And somehow, impossibly, he was sitting in Berlin watching an early round WTA match. The reaction was immediate. Tournament officials looked at each other with confusion. Journalists scrambled to make sense of what they were seeing. Even the most experienced people inside that stadium struggled to find an explanation. Because this was not Wimbledon. This was not the US Open. This was not a Grand Slam final watched by the entire world. This was a first-round match. So what was Bill Gates doing here? The mystery deepened when people began comparing notes. His arrival had not been loudly publicized. There was no major press statement, no formal announcement, no carefully managed media presence. He had simply appeared, taken a seat, and directed his complete attention toward one court. One player. Alex Eala. And those sitting closest to him noticed something that made the whole situation feel even more significant. He was not there casually. He was not scrolling through his phone. He was not networking with guests. He was not half-watching while managing other things. His eyes stayed on the court. Focused. Studying. Patient. Like a man who had come with a specific purpose and intended to see it through. The real story, the answer to why he was there, had nothing to do with rankings. Nothing to do with prize money. Nothing to do with what had happened on that court this afternoon. The real answer stretched back much further. Back through years of moments that never made headlines. Defeats absorbed in silence. Setbacks navigated without cameras watching. Long stretches of invisible progress that required enormous faith to continue pushing through. Bill Gates was not watching a tennis player. He was watching a pattern he recognized deeply. Someone who understood that the road forward runs directly through difficulty, not around it. Someone who had been underestimated repeatedly and had responded every single time, not with words, not with complaints, but with work. That kind of story does not go unnoticed by people who have lived a version of it themselves. Later that afternoon, a message reached Alex through channels she had not expected. A private meeting had been arranged. She was being invited upstairs. And she walked through that door with absolutely no idea what was waiting on the other side. The meeting, the suite, was completely still. After the roar of the crowd, after the intensity of competition, the silence inside that room felt almost physical. Alex sat down across from a man whose name existed in history books, and she did the wisest thing she could have done. She said nothing. She listened. He did not begin with ceremony. He did not treat the moment like an event to be managed. He leaned slightly forward and spoke quietly, as if this were simply a conversation between two people who both understood something important. "I have been following your journey," he said. "Not watching. Not observing casually from a distance. Following." The word meant attention over time. It meant patterns noticed. Progress remembered. Moments tracked that most people had already forgotten. Alex stayed still and kept listening. "You do not just compete," he continued, his voice steady. "You compete like someone who has a different relationship with pressure than most people do." A pause. "And pressure," he added quietly, "is something I have spent my entire life studying." Then he did something she had not expected. He made it personal. He spoke about building Microsoft during an era when the concept of a personal computer was widely dismissed. about creating something in a world that had not yet decided it needed that thing to exist, about being questioned, underestimated, told that the idea was impractical, unnecessary, too ambitious, about the long period before the world finally caught up with what he had already seen clearly. The people who actually change things, he said, are never the ones who find a way around pressure. They are the ones who learn how to live inside it. Something shifted in Alex's expression. Not dramatically, not visibly to a camera, but noticeably if you were sitting close enough to see it. Because those words did not land like advice from a stranger. They landed like a translation of something she had already experienced to her body for years, but had never quite been able to say out loud. And then he said something that caught her completely off guard. He looked at her directly and said, "I am not here to offer you money." Silence. "I am here to offer you perspective." The words sat between them in the quiet room. Perspective. He continued. What she was constructing, he explained, was not simply a tennis career. It was a legacy. And a legacy, he said with the calm certainty of someone who had built one himself, is not measured by trophies collected or titles won. It is measured by impact. By what outlasts the competition. By what continues mattering after the final match has been played. Then he reached beside him and placed a plain folder on the table between them. Nothing dramatic about it. No gold lettering, no formal presentation. Just a document sitting quietly on a table. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he explained, runs a program for emerging leaders from every field. Athletes, scientists, entrepreneurs, educators. People who are using whatever platform they have built to generate change beyond themselves. He looked at her. "I would like to nominate you." For the first time in the entire conversation, the composure Alex had been holding so carefully shifted slightly. Not in a way that broke anything, just in a way that showed she understood the full weight of what she had just heard. She looked at the folder, then at him, then back at the folder again. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and honest. "I don't know what to say." A small smile crossed his face. "You don't need to say anything," he told her. "Just keep doing exactly what you have been doing. Keep fighting. Keep refusing to stop. Keep making people pay attention." After the door closed outside, the world had not paused for any of this. Journalists were still trying to reconstruct the story of the sighting. Fans were rewatching match highlights. Social media had already filled with speculation and theories and noise. The tournament continued its ordinary rhythms, completely unaware. But inside that room, something quieter and far more durable had taken place. Not a transaction. Not a sponsorship deal. Not a publicity arrangement. A door had been opened. Not toward fame. Not toward additional wealth. Toward something harder to name and more lasting than either. Influence. Purpose. The possibility of impact that extends far beyond what any sport can contain. When Alex stepped back into the corridor, the sounds of the stadium returned to her gradually, like the world reminding her it was still there. Another match was coming. Another opponent. Another chapter waiting to be written. But something inside her had been quietly rearranged. Not in a way that would appear in tomorrow's match statistics. In a way that might shape every decision she made from this point forward. She knew something now that very few athletes are ever told directly, by someone who had actually lived it. What she was building was not small. It was not temporary. It did not have to end when her playing career ended. It could outlive the sport itself. And somewhere behind her, in that still and quiet room above center court, the man who had helped build the digital age sat with his thoughts turned not toward scores or rankings, but toward something he found genuinely more interesting. Potential. What becomes possible when a person simply refuses to quit? The door closed softly. The question floated in the empty air of that room, unanswered and alive. Was this the end of a story? Or was it the very first line of one that nobody could yet read?